Good morning, all, and welcome to Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church's worship. I'm Mike Luce. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm a member of the worship committee. Our mission calls us to celebrate diversity, encourage spiritual growth, and promote social responsibility while we travel with care for the earth. Each month, Allen Avenue supports a nonprofit organization whose mission aligns with our Unitarian Universalist principles. The Share the Plate recipient for April is College Guild. College Guild is a grassroots education and nonprofit whose mission is to provide free correspondence courses that connect incarcerated people with a community beyond prison walls, fostering mutual respect through a shared passion for learning. Research has shown that incarcerated people have participated in prison education programs have a 50% reduced chance of returning to prison. To learn more about this organization, please go to the website linked on our order of service today. So I'd like to welcome our guest speaker, Matt Meyer. He's a lifelong Unitarian with a long background as a musician and worship leader for UU congregations. Matt lives in Boston, but travels as an itinerant worship leader, bringing the good news of Unitarian Universalism to hundreds of congregations all over the country. He serves as the Director of Operations for Sanctuary Boston, a contemporary UU worship committee with rockin' music and engaging worship. Matt's children's story, Desmond Gets Free, was recently published as a book by Skinner House Press. To get a copy for your child, teacher, or any justice maker in your life, pick up a copy here at church after worship. And thank you for being with us today, Matt. And to everyone here, we're so glad you've joined us. We'll now center our hearts and minds with the ringing of the bell.
In my own home community of Sanctuary Boston, we have a saying which is, let's begin with some singing. And so our call to worship this morning is a song. Your part goes like this. Call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Let's try that. Here we go. Call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Beauty above us, beauty before us, beauty within us and beauty between us. So call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Love above us, love before us, love within us and love between us. So call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Call down a blessing, Call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Oh, you sound good. Let's continue on in song with hymn number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. You can find the words in 361 in your hymnal. We're going to do a slightly different melody, though, so pay no mind to the music. And if you think you know it, forget what you thought you knew. Today's service is about how we can practice being the person we want to be, practice building the community we want to be a part of, even in the midst of change, even in the midst of imperfection, even in the midst of uncertainty. And this morning, as we celebrate, some of us Easter, some of us the rising temperatures of springtime or Passover, this is a season of looking forward and practicing new ways of being, new ways of loving, new ways of building the kind of world we want to live in. So the song says, Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. I'll sing it through once on my own so you can get a sense of the melody. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Let's do that all together. Here we go. Enter. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoicing. That sounds good. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, enter, rejoice. Come, open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and enter, rejoice. Here we go. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoicing. Today will be a joyful day. Today will be a joyful. Today will be a joyful. Today will be a joyful. Enter, rejoice. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Let's take a deep breath. You may be seated as you exhale.
And we have these words for the chalice lighting this morning. Oh, sing a new song to the eternal. Shout praise, all earth, break into music and song. Praise the eternal with lyre and song. Let the sea and all within it thunder praise. The world and its inhabitants. Let rivers clap their hands. Let mountains sing in chorus. Oh, sing a new song to the eternal.
I'd love to share with you all this story called Desmond Gets Free. Now, Desmond the Mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond would wake with the sunrise and spend the whole day long playing in that beautiful meadow. And every night, he would go to sleep in the middle of the meadow under the beautiful starry sky. One night, though, Desmond awoke to find that it was still dark out. He tried to roll over, get more comfortable, and go back to sleep, but something wasn't right. He could hardly move, and his tail was throbbing with pain. Reaching behind him, he felt that there was, some sort of huge boulder seemed to have fallen in the middle of the meadow just on his tail. He tried pushing on this giant rock behind him with all of his strength. And then he tried tugging on his tail with all of his might to get loose. And he tried pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing over and over and over again. But it was no use. He was stuck. When he had just about given up, though, he saw another animal passing by through the meadow. It was a tall giraffe. And so he shouted out, "Oh, giraffe! It seems that some sort of boulder has fallen just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could use your powerful legs to nudge it just a few inches in the other direction, I could go free." Well, the giraffe laughed at Desmond the way giraffes do. "You silly mouse," it said. "That's no boulder that's fallen on your tail in the middle of the meadow. That is an elephant that's fallen asleep on your tail." Well, good news, thought Desmond. If you could just gently wake the elephant and just ask him to roll over even just a few inches in the other direction, I could go free. "I don't know about that," said the giraffe. "I mean, surely you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." "Well," said Desmond, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." The giraffe wandered off, so Desmond tried shouting with all of his voice to wake the elephant, but his little mouse voice was just too far away from those giant elephant ears at the way other end of that giant elephant body. Again, he tried pushing with all of his strength, and he tried tugging on his tail with all of his might, and he tried shouting and pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing and shouting until he was just about out of breath again when he saw a gazelle pass by. "Oh, gazelle," he called out, "it seems some kind of elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could just gently wake him up and ask him to roll over even just a few inches in the other direction, I could go free." "I don't know about that," said the gazelle. "I mean, surely you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." Well, the gazelle wandered off, and Desmond said almost to himself this time, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." One last time, Desmond tried shouting with all of his voice. He tried pushing with all of his strength and tugging with all of his might. And he tried shouting and pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing and shouting, until at last he had just about given up for the last time when he heard another animal pass by through the grass. This time it was another mouse. And he called out, and the mouse ran over and introduced himself. He said, "My name is Nelson. What seems to be the problem?" Well, no sooner had Desmond explained the situation than Nelson ran as fast as he could all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body. And he shouted up to those giant elephant ears at the top of that giant elephant head, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could roll over just a few inches in the other direction, he could go free." Well, the elephant heard Nelson's little mouse voice way down on the ground, but he was just a bit too far away, and his voice was just a bit too small. And to be honest, the elephant was just a bit too comfortable. He didn't budge. So Nelson thought for a moment, and he ran back to Desmond, and he said, "I think I might have an idea. Stay right here." And he ran off into the grass, leaving a confused look on Desmond's face. And just when Desmond was starting to get worried again, he saw Nelson emerge back through the grass, but he wasn't alone this time. He had found 3 mouse friends, and each of them had found another 3 mouse friends. And the whole group of them, they ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body, and one mouse climbed up on the shoulders of another, and another mouse climbed up on her shoulders. And one by one, they formed a whole mouse ladder all the way up the back of that giant elephant head. And at last, Nelson, slowly and carefully, he climbed up the shoulders of his friends one by one, and at last he stood right at the opening of that giant elephant ear. And he shouted with all of his voice, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. Roll over just a few inches so he can go free." Well, this time his voice was just too close and just too loud to ignore. So the elephant said, and he rolled over just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and his friends climbed back down to the ground, and they met up with Desmond, and the whole group of them spent the rest of that day together playing in the meadow. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who passed away just a couple months ago now, had said that if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have already taken sides. You've taken sides with the oppressor and with the powerful. And Archbishop Tutu said, if an elephant is standing on the tail of a mouse will never appreciate your neutrality. Bishop Tutu believed in a God that took sides, a God that he said took sides with the orphan and with the widow and with the oppressed everywhere. And as Unitarian Universalists, whether we believe in that God or not, we have covenanted to build a world of justice and equity and compassion. And that means coming together to take sides for justice, taking sides for equity and compassion. And it means that we come together in community to side with love. May it be so. May we make it so.
May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn.
Each week, our staff and volunteers create meaningful spiritual experiences. We have religious education programming, spiritual enrichment groups, and a variety of opportunities to create community. The funds we receive support all that we do, and 1/3 will be shared with College Guild. There's a QR code on the back of the program if you want to donate electronically, or you can wait for the plates to go around. If you're online, you can go to our website and use the donate button and indicate that it's for Share the Plate. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received.
Our offering song was written by Annie Zylstra, and she was inspired by a poem by Martin Prechtel, who spoke of what it was like to have survived an earthquake in Guatemala. Prechtel spoke of what it was like to see the ground beneath his feet, that which had always been so permanent and so solid, suddenly rise up in motion. And he said the myth of believing in solid ground is a myth believed by those of us that live on the earth rather than as a part of it. I know for the last 2 years now, I have been constantly searching for a sense of grounding, even as it feels like the ground beneath me is shifting constantly. That's been true for you as well. I invite you into the spirit of this song, to be in motion with the earth and to be in movement together. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. All moves on in perfect motion. All is change and rolling ocean. All moves on in perfect motion. All is change and rolling ocean. All moves on in perfect motion. All is change and rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion.
A reading is an untitled reading. It's by artist Beth Strano with additions by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. Together we will create a brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side.
Next song, you can repeat after me. Forget your perfect offering. Forget your perfect offering. Just sing the songs that you can sing. Just sing the songs that you can sing. There is a crack in everything. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light. So this part goes a little different. It's a little faster, right? That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. That last line is the one part where you have something slightly different than I do. That's how the light gets in. 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 Forget your perfect offering. Forget your perfect offering. Just sing the songs that you can sing. Just sing the songs that you can sing. There is a crack in everything. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. Forget your perfect offering. Forget your perfect offering. Just sing the songs that you can sing. Just sing the songs that you can sing. There is a crack in everything. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. Can we rise in body or spirit? Feels like you got it now? So we're going to make it a little harder. Forget your perfect offering. Forget your perfect offering. Just sing the songs that you can sing. Just sing the songs that you can sing. There is a crack in everything. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. Forget your perfect offering. Forget your perfect offering. Just sing the songs that you can sing. Just sing the songs that you can sing. There is a crack in everything. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. Forget your perfect offering. Forget your perfect offering. Just sing the songs that you can sing. Just sing the songs that you can sing. There is a crack in everything. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. Forget your perfect offering. Forget your perfect offering. Just sing the songs that you can sing. Just sing the songs that you can sing. There is a crack in everything. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. Forget your perfect offering. Forget your perfect offering. Just sing the songs that you can sing. Just sing the songs that you can sing. There is a crack in everything. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. 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 Did good. Let's take a deep breath. You may be seated as you exhale. Well, I start just about every day with a to-do list, usually scribbled on a little post-it note in the corner of my desk. And to be honest, between you and me, usually I don't cross everything off the list. At the end of the day, there's always at least a few things that remain unchecked. And in particular, one of those things that I struggle to check off the list on most days is making time for writing. Now, it's not that writing isn't important to me. It's so important to me, and I'm so dedicated to being a writer that every day I put it on the list. And I'm so dedicated that every day I collect quotes and prompts and story ideas so that when I do write, I'll have lots of inspiration. And I'm so dedicated that every day I'm committed to finishing other tasks and working on other pressing commitments so that eventually I will have lots of time to write. I'm so dedicated that surely one of these days I will begin. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, talks about this, about how hard it is, in fact, to just sit down and put your butt in the chair and write. She says, "The discouraging voices will hound you. This is all piffle," they will say. And they might be right. What you are doing may just be practice. But that's how you're going to get better. Very similarly, some of the best writing advice I ever got was from a teacher who once said, "Take a few minutes and, well, don't write, but just write what you would write if you were going to write." I sometimes feel like in all the years since I got that advice, I haven't written anything since. But I've written a lot about what I would write if I did write. You might call this the practice of practicing, learning how to practice. The problem is that the finished product we might imagine for ourselves can feel so impossibly far from where we begin. The published final essay is so far from that ugly, ugly first draft. The person I find in the mirror in the morning is so far from the person I would like to someday be. And the world as we would like it to be, it can feel impossibly far from what we read of in the headlines each day. The demons of perfectionism stand in the way of good writing, just as they stand in the way of creative risk-taking in general. And this is a problem because we know that building a life for yourself that doesn't yet exist requires some creative risk-taking. And we know that in uncertain and anxious times like these, just showing up as your best self every day requires setting aside those voices, those discouraging voices. And so often, even just imagining a world of true justice and equity and compassion, even just imagining it requires setting aside the voices that say your efforts are just piffle. When the demons of perfectionism show up like this, I try to practice the practicing of showing up for myself and for others. Musicians know something about practicing. One of the requirements for all students at Berklee College of Music, where I attended years ago in Boston, is 4 semesters of ear training. Now, ear training is learning to sight sing music just by reading the notes on the page, and learning to write down the sheet music just by listening to a song. And when I first began music school, I knew that there were people out there somewhere capable of this kind of magic, but to me, it seemed like some kind of Harry Potter nonsense. Like, you might as well ask me to show up to class and turn my desk into a toad using a conductor's baton. I remember a sort of nervous silence among all of us new students on the very first day of class. Well, silence except for one student. There was one student who was quite vocal in his nervousness. This one student interrupted the teacher in the first few minutes on the first class of the first day to share that he was worried the class was going to be too advanced for him. He wanted to make it clear that he didn't know a single thing about ear training. Our teacher very kindly paused his introductions, and he explained that we'd all taken entrance exams, and he was sure we'd all been placed in the appropriate class. The teacher tried to continue, but was interrupted again. Well, the man said, but is this like the very lowest class? Because I need to be in the very lowest class. Now you could tell our poor teacher got a little nervous at this point. He looked around the room sheepishly, not really wanting to answer that yes, we were in fact a class of the most basic students in the entire school. As tactfully as he could, he said, well, this is Ear Training 101. I guess there is a class for those who have previously failed the 101, but you all are just about the lowest. Now, some of the other students at this point giggled a little bit at this man's anxieties. I was kind of glad to hear, though, that someone was questioning what felt to me like the absurd notion that sight singing was even something that could be taught. I don't know what happened next for that other student, but he never returned to our class. Not because anything we did on that first day was in fact too difficult for him, I'm sure of that. But I think he lacked a belief that improvement was even possible. I kept going, thinking that if generations of music students have done this before me, it must be possible somehow, even if I personally can't find or see the way forward. And I made a commitment to at least practice the material. I've always remembered this other student, though, who gave up before he started. It's not just that he didn't try to become a great master at ear training. It's that he didn't even try the practicing of it, which always struck me as the real loss. When the discouraging voices hound me these days, I sometimes think of him, and I remind myself that maybe for now the work I'm doing is just practice, but that's how I'm going to get better. These last 2 years of COVID have been difficult, to be sure, a time of constant adaptation, a time of the ground shifting constantly beneath us, just as we are constantly looking for some more solid footing. But a time of change also means times of possibilities. Times of adaptation mean also times of imagination. I believe this is, as we look to the future, a time when we'll be organizing our days differently all over again. We'll be organizing our people differently all over again. And so in this time of adaptation, this time of imagination, I believe is a time calling on those in power, which in some ways is all of us, to learn to play some new tunes, to learn some new roles and some new ways of being, to imagine some new possibilities for our world and practice them into being. And particularly for white folks, these last couple years have been a time to practice some new skills, to play some new roles in our communities, a time for listening in deeper ways we haven't always done so well, and practicing some hard conversations we haven't yet practiced enough. This is a time of imagining a more just world, a more equitable world, even when it seems so far beyond any horizon that we can see. I know that I won't all of a sudden become a master at these things. I won't all of a sudden be skillful at the difficult conversations I've so far avoided, or all of a sudden become a master of generosity that I've always wanted to be, but I will practice doing them. Because musicians know as well as anyone that muscle memory is very real. We know that consistent practicing changes the very structure of our brains. It rewires our circuitry, forging new connections and new possibilities. No one is born a musician. Musicians are just the ones that learned how to practice. Even songbirds need elder birds to teach them their tunes and melodies. Practice doesn't make music perfect, but it makes music possible. And so let us practice the practicing, No one is born skillful at difficult conversations. No one is born skillful at organizing for racial justice. No one is born skillful at building the new world that we know is possible, at dismantling the systems of oppression that surround us, or building up a new world of justice and equity. These are things that are practiced over and over again, one step at a time. Even when we can't see the way forward, we can practice them into being. So let us practice the practicing, showing up for ourselves and others to build that new world. Practicing won't make the world perfect, but it makes a better world possible. Someday, I want to be a true expert in justice and compassion. Someday, I want to be well practiced at creating that brave space. Someday, I want to be masterful at amplifying the voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. I want to be part of transforming a so-called justice system that has hurt so many so deeply. I want to be part of shifting an energy sector that's been working overtime to overheat our planet. These are daunting tasks, to be sure. And on most days, learning to transcribe a symphony by ear seems more manageable than any single one of them. But that's okay, because for now, I don't have to do all of those things. I just need to practice doing what I would do if I were doing them. So, dear ones, don't promise to be your best self today. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such beautiful things. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow, so let us start together, let us grow together, and may we practice together. Amen. Our closing song was written in a time of war, imagining a time of peace. It was written after 9/11 by Rabbi Menachem Creditor. The words are Olam Chesed Yibaneh, which says the world will be built with loving kindness. I think feels like a Unitarian adjacent song, at least, in that it doesn't specify exactly who's going to be doing the building. It leaves it to us to imagine and to step into the role if we so choose. Would you repeat after me? Olam, Chesed, Yibaneh. Olam, Chesed, Yibaneh. Beautiful. And particularly in this time of Passover, as our Jewish siblings in faith are telling the story of the Exodus, a time of stepping into the wilderness, stepping into the unknown in order to seek out a promised land, even when that promised land is beyond any horizon that they could see. Let's imagine journeying together through this wilderness and imagining that land and building it together. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, Yadadai, Yadadai, Yadadai. 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 That's the whole thing. Here we go. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, Yadadai, Yadadai, Yadadai. Again. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, Yadadai, Yadadai, Yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. A little louder, here we go. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, 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 yadadai, yadadai. Here we go, here we go. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. 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 Here we go. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. 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 One more. Olam chesed yibaneh. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. 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 Beloveds, don't promise to be your best self today. Just for today, just practice being the person you would be if you were being your best self. Don't attempt to build a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such beautiful things. Go in peace, go in love, and go and be blessed as you are a blessing to others. Amen.